Welcome to episode 13 of Chambers Chatter. I'm Laura Chambers-Babeles.
And I'm Shay Chambers-Helms. Today we're super excited to introduce Anita Singleton Prather to the show. She's most well known for her deep involvement through the arts, education, and community of Beaufort. Welcome, Anita. We're so happy to have you here today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Finally made it happen.
I love it. So we're going to kind of start at the beginning. What are some of your earliest memories of Beaufort and the Sea Islands and growing up here?
Well, this is my home. We're about 7 generations now in this community. So I had a great childhood. Close knit community, the Northwest Quadrant, they call it now. But right in the midst of the Civil War was called the Freedmen's Village. Because, as early as November 7th of 1861, we were liberated here in Beaufort, only 7 months after the Civil War had begun. So, yeah, this is home sweet home.
I love that. I love that. What are some of your childhood memories? What were you and your friends doing? Anything that kind of comes to home?
I guess we could have been the little rascals, Yeah. Everybody talks about women's lib and that kind of stuff. We were liberated as kids because, the girls played things the boys did, and the boys did everything we did. My brothers could braid hair. They could play jackstones. We could catch a hard ball without a glove. You had to learn to run real fast because they would tackle you, because we didn't play flag football. We played tackle football. So you learned at an early age to run real fast. Everybody climbed trees together. When it was time, marble season, everybody had marbles hanging from their skirt, tied up in a sock and a knot. And everybody had slingshots. Everybody knew how to do the little paddle ball. So yeah, it was always and even going to Sunday school on Sunday morning, it would start with the 5 of us, and by the time we'd go up in the corner and we'd pick up Ray and Denise and Avis and Dwayne, and by the time we got down to Washington Street, on the street where my grandmother lived, and there was all the Harris boys. And then you just keep going through the neighborhood, and you end up with Jimmy and Kenneth Brown and those. And so by the time we got to Sunday school, maybe about 25 of us.
That's so fun, though.
Yeah.
So fun.
And it was so funny because going to Sunday school, we would pass by the Jewish bakery, Schulenburg Bakery. And we would smell the donuts because they were open on Sunday.
Yes.
And so, we would go on to Sunday school, and nobody wanted a case dime. You wanted either 2 nickels or 5 pennies and a nickel. You really wanted 10 pennies, so that when it was time to put money in the Sunday school collection, you put about 2 pennies in, and Miss Cozell would say, "I know Inez gave you more money." "No, ma'am, Miss Cozell, that's all Mama had." Because my mother would always be late to church, so we would double back to Schulenburg Bakery and go in there, and it'd be about 25 of us, and everybody would say the same thing: 2 for a nickel leftover donuts. 2 for a nickel leftover donuts. And so
Childhood core memory.
Yes. So that was always a big thing for us. Miss Cozell, I think during the summer we would go maybe to the beach with the church Sunday school, maybe about 2-3 times during the summer. And in between that time, my mom and those would take, and that's when you had the colored side of the beach and the white side of the beach. So now, where you put the RVs and the campers, that was the colored side of the beach, and then the other side was the white side. And and even as a kid, I would say, how they gonna keep the water separated? How they gonna keep the water separated? I could, your little mind, things like that. And, climbing the trees all day long. We'd be sitting up in the oak trees, and now when my grandkids go, I say, "Y'all better get out before you fall." And I'm saying, God said, "Did you remember when you would sleep up there for about 2 hours in the trees?" Yeah. And so I say, "Y'all will be all right." But yeah.
Oh my goodness, that's amazing. How did the Penn Center and your parents kind of intersect with the civil rights movement? And how did that shape you?
My mother was a school teacher. My dad was a civil service worker. He was a house painter. My paternal grandfather was born in 1875, only 10 years out of slavery in Colleton County, right there on Cherokee Plantation. And he was the first one that they sent off the plantation to be formally educated. So he was in one of the early graduating classes of South Carolina State University.
Wow.
And so he came back to Cherokee Plantation and started a school there for the other Africans that were on that plantation. And my grandparents were cousins because they didn't allow a whole lot of outside Africans on that plantation. So my grandfather was 27 years older than my grandmother. She was his second wife. His first wife was cousins to Robert Smalls. And we had the old family Bible that had Robert Smalls's in their signature because he was a guest at their wedding.
Oh my gosh.
So, like I said, my grandmother was his second wife, and my grandmother died at childbirth, having my dad and his twin brother. And the twin brother died about 11 months after my dad did. And at the time, my father was the baby. And so his older sister and my grandfather and his older siblings, brothers, reared him. And my grandfather moved over to Beaufort County. He bought property in the Seabrook area right there around where Well Branch Middle School. So all that property in front of Well Branch Middle School was my grandfather's property. And so my aunt was also a graduate of South Carolina State. And so she came back and he started a school there as well. So she ran the school over there in Seabrook, and he was the headmaster of the school in Colleton County. And he also farmed. So he would, the railroad track is only about a half a mile from where his property was. And so he would export vegetables to New York and Philadelphia, D.C., Chicago. And so my father and his brother, Uncle Charlie, the two of them went to Tuskegee Institute. After my dad was in the Navy, Uncle Charlie went in the Army. When they came back, they both went to Tuskegee and came back. So part of education and fighting for civil rights was just one of those things that was just part of my DNA. And so my mother was a first-generation college graduate, and she went to Savannah State. And as a child, she was living with her grandparents. And my grandparents used to live on where the air station is now. That used to be called Edgerly. And because my grandmother was working in Virginia, and she would work, they would go away and they would work and they'd send monies back. And so that's what she was doing, sending monies back to my great-grandparents to help with my grandmother and, with my mother and her other siblings. And so my great-grandparents were rowing their boat. They would row their boat from where the cabin is on the air station across the river to where the old Kmart building used to be. And they came into town to buy wood, lumber, because they were going to add another room onto their house. And on the way back, the boat capsized. And my grandfather went to try to save my great-grandmother, and they both died.
Oh,
and so
my
grandmother moved back home. And in third grade, so she put my mother into boarding school it was called the Port Royal Normal Training School. And it was set up the same way Penn Center was set up, the same way where TCL is now, was the Mather School, because all three of the schools were set up, modeled after the Tuskegee Institute. So the Shanklins who came from Tuskegee, old man Joseph Shanklin, he was the senior. He was the first headmaster out there at Shanklin School. And so my mother was out there, and they used to call it Shanklin School. And she was there from 3rd to 10th grade, because at that time you graduated in 10th grade. And she went on to Savannah State, played basketball, and came back and started working in the school system. And so, again, like I said, always involved in civic events, and my grandmother, who was a single mother at the time, had started buying her house in town on Washington Street. You know, Tyler Perry played Madera, but my grandmother was the real Madera, I'm here to tell you. And she lived at 1107 Washington Street. And then if you go to the end of Washington Street where it dead ends, that big house at the end was the Christensen House. And they were abolitionists that came down during that period in our history. And my grandmother were working for them, some of her, descendants, Miss Abby Christensen and some of her offsprings. And so we're talking about, gosh, I was 5 or 6, so we're talking about the early 60s or whatever. And she never called them Miss Helen or Miss Winnie. It was Winnie, get out my kitchen. Don't you open that oven and make my cake fall. I'll call you when it's ready. And so I didn't grow up with a fear of white folks. And my dad wasn't like that either. He was a very proud black man. And so I can remember integrating. We were one of the first black families to integrate Beaufort Elementary School, which is now University of South Carolina Beaufort campus. That was my elementary school. And even before it became Beaufort Elementary or even Beaufort High School, it was the colored public school. It was the first colored public school that General Robert Smalls was the president of the trustee board.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. And it was there on this side where the big red building is, which is the Center for the Performing Arts. That was where the colored school was. And across the street, across the dirt road, where we have the big administration building, that was the white school. So the kids would be segregated during class time, but recess, they all played together in the dirt. And then when the bell rang, they went back to the sides. And so when they needed more classroom space for the white public school, then they made the black public school close down. And that's when they moved the colored public school down to where the county building is now, which became the Robert Smalls site. And it was named after Robert Smalls. And it became Robert Smalls Elementary, Junior High, and High School. And it was the city dump. That's what it was. And that's where they moved them. But it flourished. Good. It flourished, yeah. And so that's why I started first and second grade there. Mm-hmm.
Wow. Mm-hmm. It's such a period of time that we just cannot, it's so hard for us to fathom that. Yeah.
It really is.
So, okay, switching gears a little bit, we hear that your nickname is Aunt Pearlie Sue. How did that name come about?
Well, that's really my stage name.
Okay.
I was the co-founder of the Hallelujah Singers, and I was a member of my home church that I grew up in. It was First African Baptist Church down there in La Pointe. It's the only black piece of property that's still down there. And that church was founded right in the midst of Reconstruction, the beginning of Reconstruction. The unique thing about it, it was founded by newly freed Africans. And a lot of churches were formerly white churches that was given to black parishioners. This church the property was bought by freemen, and it was built by freemen. The original church structure had no nails.
How do they?
What?
Yeah, it was the dove
tail.
Yeah,
Wow.
They were master carpenters, and so they built that structure with no nails.
That's incredible.
It's very impressive.
Truly.
And then one of the things, like there's a beam that's from the front all the way to the back, one solid beam, and they still trying to figure out how they managed to get it from Augusta, Georgia here.
Is that the only original part left, that one beam?
No.
No, you can still see some of that old structure.
Yeah, if you go to First African Baptist, they got new doors and stuff like that on that's modern. But basically that front part of the church is still
The original.
They've done some renovations, in the last maybe 10, 20 years.
Right.
They had the original pipe organ was in there. They took it out now, but I think they moved it upstairs. Originally, it didn't have a baptismal pool, but when I grew up, there was one there because they used to baptize folks when Boundary Street turns into Carteret Street, right there. That it's called Bellamy Curve. That's where they used to baptize.
Just go down into the water
Down to
there?
the river.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, they used to baptize them there. In fact, there's some footage up at the Library of Congress of Zora Neale Hurston, who was the famous writer and anthropologist during the Renaissance, the Harlem Renaissance period. There's some footage of her being down there witnessing a baptism.
How cool.
I had no idea about that.
Yeah, I didn't either. How cool is that?
Yeah.
Huh. Okay, so switching gears again, why did you feel Gullah heritage needed its own ministry?
Every group basically is responsible for telling their own story. And we needed to be responsible for telling ours. I would often hear people say, well, they never taught me that in school. Oh, yeah. I said, well, you don't hear Jewish folks blaming folks for not, you don't hear Hispanics or Asians or anybody else talking about they didn't teach our history. The elders. That's the responsibility. And even in the Word of God, it says, older women teach the younger women. Older men teach the younger men. And so that's our responsibility, to tell our story.
Did you have any pushback or any surprises that came along?
Oh, girl, I don't even care. You have to care about somebody else's opinion to even, folks say things to me all the time. I say, you know what, boo? I don't even care. If you're trying to stress me, I'm the wrong person.
That's good. That's a good way to look at life.
That's just like me coming here and trying to tell your story. And telling Shay what you got to say about you don't mean nothing because I know your story better than you do. That's crazy. You just say, that lady crazy, and you go on about your business. That's about what I do.
Best way to live it. Absolutely.
And I'm not trying to tell every black person's story because everybody's story is different. And oftentimes, when people talk about Gullah-Geechee, they think it's monolithic, but it's not because we had different masters. We came from, different countries in West Africa. Some of us came from the central part and was brought down to the coast to be placed on the ships. So we came with all kinds of differences, but what I try to get people to understand, let's celebrate the similarities and let's share the differences so that we all, all of us become richer. Hydrogen is good by itself. Oxygen is good by itself, but by itself, it cannot make water. Right. So when we come together, we make something that's sustaining, that sustains life. And so I think that's the important part of everybody telling their part of the story. And nobody's story is any greater or less than the next person. It's part of the puzzle.
Yeah. Oof, that gave me chills.
That was beautiful.
Truly beautiful. So tell us about founding the group, the Gullah Kinfolk, back in 1999, and why a family ensemble.
Well, like I said, I was one of the co-founders of the Hallelujah Singers, and Marlena moved here from Middletown, Virginia. Ohio. She was born in Ohio, and she'd moved here, and she was working with the Parks and Leisure Services here, and I was sort of the youth minister at my church. I was writing plays. I played the organ, was over the choirs and that kind of stuff. And so, and I had been creating plays since probably junior high school. And like I said, when my parents were involved in the civil rights movement, we would go over to Penn Center and they would have a rally and we would be doing, culturally enrichment type things, understanding our cultural histories and that kind of stuff. And so, it was just one of those things, it wasn't called spoken word back then. It was just saying, called writing a speech to say something, but they call it spoken word now. But anyway, so it was just I went to school at Howard University in D.C. and my dream was always to come back home. I was supposed to go into law to be a civil rights attorney. but I wanted to watch The Young and the Restless at the time. You know, I had a crush on Snapper. And so I said, well, if I switch to psychology, because they always had a psychiatrist or some kind of therapist on the soap operas, I said, be like, you know, having a special tutor or something. And as long as I keep at least a B average, keep mama happy, because my dad had just passed the year before, and mama had about 4 of us in college at the same time, so I didn't want to stress out.
No, yeah.
But I did want to watch The Young and the Restless, so I ended up switching to psychology and ended up with started teaching when I came back home, because my mother had taught for 37 years, and like I said, my grandfather, you know, was a teacher. My uncle was a teacher, you know, so it was just easy. It was an easy thing for me to do. And my plan was to teach for 2 years and go back to law school. But I got into teaching and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed my kids.
We want to take a quick break to thank our sponsor, Watkins Mechanical.
Hey y'all, it's Josh with Watkins Mechanical. Warm weather is finally here and your system is working hard to keep you cool. Here are 3 quick tips to help. 1. Replace your air filters monthly. Restrictions cause your system to work harder and reduce your air quality. 2. Keep your outdoor unit clean. Remove any leaves, debris, or dirt for proper airflow. 3. Set your thermostat at a constant temperature. Programmable thermostats improve efficiency and help save you money. For quality service and lasting results, call Watkins Mechanical, trusted in the Low Country for over 25 years. Brian, whatever it takes.
And I started creating, and I'm realizing now I probably should have been diagnosed ADD, ADHD, but I just kept it moving. So because, you know, I moved around all the time, so I was very unconventional. Used to drive my principals crazy, but they didn't bother me because, you know, my students learned. And I was always creating plays or some kind of games or something to make learning fun. And so all of it just sort of just came together. And when Marlena heard what I was doing at the church, and I'd heard about her, and we finally met, and she talked about wanting to start a community center that offer ethnic art for our African-American youth in the community. I said, hey, if it's about kids, count me in. And so we started rehearsing, and I remember when she first wanted this to do this big musical, and she wanted all the gospel greats of Beaufort to come, and she put out this audition call, and nobody showed up, and she was devastated. And I said to her, I said, well, you know what? Let's just use the parents, you know, the family members of this, you know, the kids we have in the program. And so at the time, I had a young adult choir at the church. I said, I'll bring them in. Most of them were my cousins. And so I brought them in, and before you know it, we had a choir of maybe 50-something people.
Wow.
And some of the people had never sang in a choir before, anything like that. And Marlena had written this monologue. And she had this young lady trying to learn it, and it just kept falling flat. And I said, Marlena, why don't you let me translate that in Gullah? She said, oh, no, just leave it like it is. And we would talk. We would meet like 5 o'clock in the morning because I had to be to work at 7.
Right.
So, because I was teaching full time. And so, so one morning I said, she called, I said, when Louise was first brought you, us was a proud people of the Madera. She said, oh, I like that. What's that? I said, that's your monologue. And I had translated it to Gullah. And from that time on, I became, I was already assistant director, but then I became the narrator and the storyteller for the group. And that's basically how I started. It was supposed to only been a one-time thing because we were trying to raise money. We found, you know, like I said, we were rehearsing and doing the shows and stuff in the church. But we had finally found an old raggedy building that needed a lot of work and we needed a lot of money. And so we were going to take this musical and, you know, use it as a fundraiser, and just snowballed.
And it just snowballed. And so that musical event just led to your entire career pretty much within the arts. And I'm assuming that was also the subject you were teaching, correct?
I was teaching remedial math.
What?
I was teaching math.
I would have never guessed that. That would have been the last subject.
Yeah, I was teaching math. And I was doing, I had what did they call that? the Junior something club, but it was a anti-drug alcohol club. And so I had the biggest club because I had all the so-called thugs, everybody joined my club. But I mean, my kids, we did a lot of work with, because, drugs was an issue, and so, so yeah, that was my thing. And I coached JV basketball for girls.
You did everything.
How incredible is that?
Did you have a favorite performance?
We went to D.C. By this time, we had Forrest Gump had come, and we were the choir in Forrest Gump. And it was so funny because I told the choir members one day when we were rehearsing, I said, I'm going to Hollywood. And everybody laughed. Girl, you so crazy. I said, y'all say what you want. I'm going to Hollywood. And next thing we knew, Sally Fields and Bob Zemeckis was sitting in First African Baptist Church at our rehearsals. And I said, well, I guess I didn't have to go to Hollywood. Hollywood came to me.
They came to you?
Yeah.
I got chills
and
again.
So we were the choir in that scene when Forrest Gump was in the choir.
Yes.
Tom Hanks would hang out in Beaufort, and we were in this restaurant downtown was called Tapas at the time. And I was sitting, and he was sitting behind me, and he leaned behind me. He said, how's your food? I said, mine's good. How's yours? He said, good. I said, all right. And they would, we just loved having them here. Yeah. And it was such a nice experience, having them here. But yeah, Hollywood came. And later I did go to Hollywood. After I left the Hallelujah Singers and started my own group, I did a movie that was called My Man Done Me Wrong.
Oh,
but he won't
tell
do that
us
no
more,
girl. My producer, I met him because after I was with, like I said, Marlene and I were together for about 10 years. We were creating all kind of Gullah plays and stuff, and then I decided to, go our separate ways. And so I went to, the last thing I had done with them was a cassette, and I did one story on it. It was called The Chicken Dinner Money Story. And so, I didn't do any of the business part of, I was just on the creative end, that kind of stuff. And so did a lot of research. But anyway, I got a chance I ran into this DJ in Charleston. They were having this Spoleto, and we were invited to do one of our productions at Spoleto.
It's incredible.
And I wasn't, like I said, I wasn't privy to all the business end of stuff, even though by this time we were business partners. And so in the midst of all that, my mother had gotten sick and was diagnosed with MS, so I was sort of on the sideline with a sort of sabbatical trying to take care of her, and we were trying to take care of her and find out what the best care for her was at the time. So anyway, we got this invite to perform at Spoleto, and I went to Charleston, and we had 2 nights to do. And the first show, she said, don't do the Chicken Dinner Money Story. I said, well, okay. I had plenty of stories. She said, do another story. So I did. And the people, all these black folks came after the show and sort of came like a mob. We came to see the Chicken Dinner Money Lady, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And I'm like, okay. So I went on back to my hotel room. So the next night she said, make sure you do this. I'm going to let you do all the time. I said, okay. So the next night, I still didn't get to say anything, because like I said, she was, at the time, and so I said, well, okay. And when God told me it was time for me to leave the group, then that's what I did. And so one of the things I wanted to do was record an album of just my stories, not singing, but just my stories. And so so Steve Ziplow, who was the executive producer of that Chicken Dinner Story cassette, called me and he said, well, first the DJ that first night came up to me. She says, well, who's the Chicken Dinner lady? I said, well, I guess that would be me. Because they didn't know it was me, because it was just, it was just my voice.
Right.
And she said, do you know it's on the gospel chart, the top gospel chart? It's number 4.
Oh,
and
my
I said,
God.
and I said, well, okay. You know, to me, I'm like, oh yeah, I don't care, because I don't deal with that, because I went on to my room. So by the time Steve Ziplo called me and approached me about, well, Anita, I want to do just, just your stories. He said, you know, it's your chicken dinner money story that's selling the album. I said, I don't care. You know, you and y'all made the deal. So, you know, you're not going to give me. And he said, well, do you know it's now number 2? I said, really? I said, it's number 2 to what? And the number 1 gospel song that year was What God Has for Me, It Is for Me. And my chicken dinner money story was number 2.
Wow. That's incredible.
And so I said, well, okay, Lord, I hear you. And so when he released me from my assignment, that's what I went to do. I went to record my stories, but I told him, I don't want to just do a cassette. I want to do it in video form. And I ran into Ned Tupper, because Ned's house was right around the corner from my church, First African Baptist. And Steve had sent me over this 17-page contract. He said, well, Anita, I want to produce it. I said, okay, Steve. I said, let me tell you this now. I ain't leaving the black slave driver to go back to the master. I said, so I just want to let you do that. No, Anita. I said, okay. So I'm reading, first time I ever read a contract, and I'm reading, and I'm highlighting stuff. And I said, this ain't feeling right. This ain't feeling right. So when I ran into Ned, I was on my way around to the church for rehearsal with the kids. And I said, Ned, I got something I want you to look at. He looked at it. He looked at it. He said, Anita, you know, I'm not an entertainment attorney, but I can tell you one thing. This is going to have you tied up for 5 to 10 years. I said, well, you know, that's what the Spirit told me, but I just wanted to double check. I said, okay, thank you. So I called Steve back. I said, Steve, thank you, but no thank you. I think I'm going to do this one on my own.
Oh,
I ain't had a penny now. Yeah. This is just I guess the Spirit was talking, or the food was talking, somebody was talking. So,
thank gosh you caught that, though.
So he said to me, he said, well, Anita, do you mind? This was Ned. He said, do you mind if I send this to a friend of mine in Charleston? He's an entertainment attorney. I said, okay, no problem. And his name was Lee Ortner. And so he arranged for Lee and I to have a meeting. And I got up there with Lee, and I took my best friend and my brother-in-law went up with me. And so I told Lee, I said, listen, this is what I want to do. I want to make my own, produce my own stories. I want it in video form. I want to top everybody. I don't want nothing jacked up. You know, I don't mind nobody making money off of me, but I want to make the most. I say, even if I decide to use it as shaman and wipe my big black so-and-so, then this will be mine to wipe. But
my decision.
Yeah, my decision. And so he said, okay. He turned about 25 shades of red. He said, Anita, do you mind if I introduce you to somebody? I said, who's that? He said, I have a young man that's renting office space, and he's a video producer. Do you mind if I introduce you? I said, sure. So I came back the next day, and I was introduced to Ron Small. And both of them were Jewish. It was so funny, you know. And because Ron would tickle me because he'd say, you need to talk to the big guy upstairs. You know, you can say Jesus. He ain't going to bite you. You know, Jesus was a Jew, Ron. And so anyway, so Ron, so he introduced me to Ron, and I gave Ron the same spiel. And Ron said he was sitting down there writing, this lady is crazy. I'll never see her again. She is a complete idiot. And last thing I told Ron, I said, Ron, you can either ride this gravy train with me, or I will wave you as I pass you by, because this is ordained by God. Oh. This is not a me thing. This is a God thing. And he really thought I was crazy then. So he said, I'll tell you what, I'll have a proposal for you in a week. I said, okay. So he finally called me up and said he had a proposal. I said, how much you need? He said, I need $50,000. And this, my nephew will be 27 on his next birthday. So we're talking about almost, I said, $50,000. I said, that's all you need? You sure that's all you need? He said, well, I may need about $8,000 for marketing. I said, so you're saying $58,000? He said, well, yeah. You sure that's all you need? He said, well, yeah. I said, because see, when I go talk to Jesus about this, I'm going to tell him exactly what you say we need. I said, because I ain't got a penny right now, but he got it. So, I'll get back with you. So I came back. So I had a meeting with my mother and my family members, my siblings and everything. And I told my mother was always one of my biggest cheerleaders, her and my grandmother, and they always encouraged us to dream big. And so I told Mom, and I told her, I said, okay. Mama said, well, how much does he need down? So I called Ron. I said, how much you need? He said, well, I need $12,500. I said, okay. My mother came next day. She had my cashier's check for $12,500. We drove back up there, and I put it on his desk. I said, when do we get started?
Oh, how special.
So we ended up, he brought in the number one, one of the number one directors came in from Oregon, and he brought in an award-winning set designer, and we recorded it out at Battle Creek High School. They built out, some more space, and this guy made the oak trees out of cornflakes, and it looked just like real oak tree and everything, and yeah, and in a week time we recorded 2 videos.
Wow, that's quick.
And they thought we weren't going to be able to do the 2 videos, and right that Wednesday night, he and Clark Santee, who was the director, came and said to me, Anita, I think we're going to only have enough time to do the 1 video. I said, okay. And maybe about 3 or 4 o'clock in the night, God woke me up and he showed me exactly how to do the children's video.
Oh, my
And then we could get it
gosh.
done in about 4 hours. So it's about, I can't call him 3 o'clock in the morning. He's going to really think I'm crazy. So as soon as 7:01 hit, he was at the hotel. I said, listen, Ron, God showed me exactly what to do and how to do it.
Oh, my
And we
God.
recorded both of them that week. And so
Wow.
we had Tales from the Land of Gullah and Tales from the Land of Gullah for kids. And we recorded both of them and the music. So it was a video, and we had the CDs that went with it.
If people wanted to watch that today, where would they go find it?
They probably could pull it up on YouTube.
Okay.
YouTube, yeah.
I'm going to have to go check it out.
I know, yeah. What are you in the works on right now?
Oh my God, we have. Ooh. Well, our newest. I'm just finishing up our newest play, musical, which is the Gullah-Geechee experience during the American Revolution, and it's been an interesting journey. It's been probably one of the hardest ones for me to write,
Really?
because it challenges all of our American heroes. The founding of America. We're getting ready to celebrate 250 years. But how do you reconcile President George Washington as a slave owner? Thomas Jefferson, 600 slaves. Francis Marion, the Swamp Fox hero of South Carolina, 300 and plus slaves. So it's been a hard one for me to write and to balance that there is some good, but let's not forget this on the other side. Not that you want to hate anybody, but we have to tell the whole truth, because
The
a
whole
piece of truth becomes just a whole lie.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it's been quite challenging to write this one. One of the stories that really is Ona Judge, and she was owned by George Washington. And Martha wanted to give her as a wedding gift to their granddaughter, who was not nice. And so Ona ran away. This is in Philadelphia, because Philadelphia was the heart of the abolitionist movement in America. And so George and Martha wanted to keep things kind of hush-hush, because, until they got D.C. ready. That's where he was as far as being the president. And so the law was if you had an enslaved person in Philadelphia for longer than 6 months, they automatically became emancipated. So what George and Martha would do, they would rotate their slaves out. So they would send them back to Mount Vernon, and then rotate them back so that the 6 months would have to start over again. So when Ona heard about her getting ready to be the wedding gift to this tyrant, she ran away. So George was just beside himself. So he sent bounty hunters and everybody to look her, find her, and that kind of stuff. And so he wrote this letter to the Secretary of the Treasury, said, in gratitude. We treated her like a child and not like a servant. And she should not escape impunity if it can be avoided. So his intent was to show her. And she was able to finally get to, I think she escaped to Rhode Island. And even after he got out of the presidency, he still was hunting her. And he sent his nephew when he found out that she was up there. And she heard the knock at the door, and she thought it was maybe a neighbor. Her husband, by this time she was married, her husband was out at sea, and she had a 1-year-old son. And when she opened the door, it was George's nephew coming to get her. And George told her, but not, make her think that I'm not going to take no retribution on her. Just tell her, just come back nicely, because she's like part of the family, and we just miss her. So, and when he made the plea, she just said, no, I'm not going back. No. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
So those are some of the, and because I had done a lot of research on, the Civil War and the Reconstruction period and the Civil Rights, but, I knew basic stuff about the American Revolution War, but I had never done extensive study.
Yeah. Wow.
And it was really hard to even try to find information about the African Americans. What I had to finally, I said, you know what? Let me work backwards. Let me find some people who may have. And that's how I started digging up Ona Judge and let me see. I knew Thomas Jefferson, and then but I didn't know he had that many. I said, wow. And then, yeah. And the biggest slave owner in America was from South Carolina. The guy who started Brook Green Gardens.
Wow.
He was the owner of that plantation.
Jeez.
He had over 1,000. Mm-hmm.
Wow. When will this play be ready for production?
Oh, ready or not. July 19th is the premiere at the May River Theater in Bluffton. We have a 2:00 show and a 6:00 show. We'll show a snippet, and when I mean a snippet, one of the scenes out of one of the acts on July the 2nd at USCP, and then we'll do on the 9th, we'll show it again, the snippet, just a snippet, at Christ Lutheran Church on Hilton Inn. Then the 19th will be the full production, the full premiere. So, yeah.
Okay, final question. What message do you hope to leave to future generations with your work?
We're struggling with DEI and all that kind of craziness. We're all immigrants here. So let me just put that out there. But again, just like I said, if you have oxygen and you have hydrogen, and both of them are very important, but they can't bring sustainable water being isolated alone. So we do need each other. And, an argument should not be because you like oranges and I like apples. You like bananas, but pineapple is my favorite.
Right.
We need that each one of those different fruits bring a nutrient or a mineral or something that we need for the body to sustain us. And when we look at people that come with differences, there's something there that we all need, that sustains us all. So we don't have to continuously do this fighting and fussing. And I look at our young people, and I guess the message I want to tell you, please don't take our example, because we've been horrible examples for you. This is not how it's supposed to be. We don't have to hate one another because we have differences or we like different things.
It's amazing.
Yeah. We got too much stuff that we need to be grateful and that we all share, we need in common. So I want to leave that.
Anita, thank you.
Thank you so
much.
much.
You're so welcome, honey.
This was
truly
truly
beautiful.
special.
Thank you.
Cannot wait to hear how the production goes.